A family moved into a new house in a quiet neighborhood. Alex was a businessman who was always busy with his work and didn't have time for his wife, Jessica, who was always sad. It was a calm night, and the family was enjoying their dinner when Jessica heard a faint sound of a woman crying. The sound seemed to be coming from the next house. She paused and listened carefully, her heart racing with a mix of curiosity and unease. Jessica said, "Did you hear that?" It sounded like a woman crying. Alex, preoccupied with his work, glanced up briefly. "No, I didn't hear anything." "Are you sure?" Jessica pressed, her voice filled with concern. "Yes, I am," Alex replied. They both went to the bedroom and slept, but Jessica's sleep broke from the sound of crying. She heard sobbing throughout the night, each wail growing more haunting and despairing. She struggled to sleep, her mind plagued by sorrowful cries. The following day, while making breakfast, Jessica said, "The crying sound is coming from the next house. I think we should go and see what's wrong. We are new in this neighborhood. It will be better if we don't indulge in all this. Also, I won't be coming home tonight. I have some work to do, so I will be back tomorrow morning," Alex responded, his eyes fixed on the screen of his laptop. Jessica didn't say anything, feeling the weight of her loneliness sinking deeper within her. That night, as darkness draped the surroundings, Jessica sat alone in her bedroom. The air seemed thicker, and an eerie silence enveloped the house. As she sat reading a book, she heard a faint sound coming from outside. It was again a woman crying, softly at first, but growing louder and more insistent. Her curiosity mingled with growing dread, and she couldn't bear the thought of ignoring it any longer. Determined to uncover the source of the cries, she got up and went to the window. The moonlight cast an ethereal glow on the empty street. She checked the street, but it was devoid of life. The crying, however, continued, growing more and more unbearable with each passing moment. Desperate to find the source of the noise, Jessica mustered her courage and ventured toward the house next door. As she stood there, trying to figure out what to do next, she heard a voice from behind her. "Are you okay?" It was her neighbor, Mr. Johnson, a weathered man with a grave expression. "I heard a woman crying next door," she said, her voice trembling, hoping he could provide some answers. Mr. Johnson shook his head, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and fear. "That house has been abandoned for years. There's nobody in there." Jessica couldn't believe it. How could she be hearing the crying if there was nobody there? She retreated to her house, the weight of the mystery lingering in her mind. Unable to shake off the unsettling encounter, Jessica called the police. The police arrived. They knocked on the door of the mysterious house, but no one answered. They tried the doorknob, but it was locked. Determined to solve the mystery, the police decided to break down the door. With a resounding crash, the door splintered open, revealing the dark and eerie interior of the house. The police cautiously entered the premises. The air inside was heavy with a musty scent, and the faint sound of wind whistled through the cracks. Each room they explored revealed nothing but emptiness, as if the house had been frozen in time. The police searched every nook and cranny, their flashlights casting sharp beams of light into the darkness. But there was no sign of anyone, no evidence of a woman crying, or any presence that could explain the haunting sounds. Jessica felt a mixture of relief and frustration. She was sure she had heard the cries, but now it seemed as though the house held no answers. She knew what she had heard, and she was determined to find the truth. When Alex returned and got to know about the police visit, he scolded Jessica. "This is too much, Jessica. I told you not to interfere." "But I heard someone crying," Jessica said while holding her tears. "You have gone mad. There's nothing like this." "It's just your fucking imagination," Alex shouted. Jessica started crying and said, "Why are you shouting? I am not lying." Alex hugged her and consoled her. "Sorry, baby. I was loud. Please be calm. Everything will be fine." Jessica stopped crying and slept. As she was sleeping, she again heard the crying, which was louder than ever before. She got up and went outside, following the sound to the next house. She walked over to the next house and knocked on the door, but there was no answer. The crying, however, became louder and more intense. "Hello? Is anyone there?" Jessica said in a terrified voice. But the crying continued, and she could now hear other sounds, like footsteps and whispers. She pushed the door, and it opened. It was dark and musty, and the floorboards creaked under her feet. She followed the sound of the crying to a back room. She opened a door, which led to a room filled with dolls. Jessica screamed in fear. She ran outside and came in front of another door. She hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. She found a woman huddled in the corner, her face buried in her hands. "Are you okay?" Jessica asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The woman looked up at her, and Jessica froze. It was herself, crying in the corner. Jessica screamed and woke up. It was a bad dream. She started shivering, and Alex hugged her and supported her. Days turned into weeks, and the crying persisted, tormenting Jessica's nights and haunting her thoughts during the day. She sought the help of a paranormal investigator, who agreed to accompany her back to the abandoned house. Together, they embarked on a ghostly exploration, armed with equipment to capture any paranormal activity. As they entered the house once more, the atmosphere became charged with otherworldly energy. The investigators' equipment crackled with static, and the temperature dropped, sending icy tendrils down their spines. As they ventured further into the house, shadows danced ominously on the walls. They cautiously made their way through the dimly lit rooms, their hearts pounding in anticipation. And then, in the darkest corner of a back room, they found a hidden passage, concealed behind an old, musty tapestry. The investigators' equipment buzzed with intensity as they stepped through the threshold, entering a secret chamber that had long been forgotten. Within the chamber, they discovered a small, long-abandoned nursery. The walls were adorned with faded wallpaper, and dusty toys were strewn about. But what caught Jessica's attention was a worn photograph on the wall. It depicted a woman, her face etched with sorrow, holding a baby in her arms. Suddenly, the air grew heavy, and a spectral figure materialized before them. It was the woman from the photograph, her eyes brimming with tears. Her presence was both ethereal and melancholic, a tragic spirit trapped in the realm between the living and the dead. Jessica, filled with compassion and empathy, reached out to the ghostly figure, her voice quivering with emotion. "What happened to you? Why are you still crying?" As the ghostly woman began to speak, her voice a fragile whisper, the truth unraveled. She had once lived in the house, a mother burdened by grief and isolation. Her husband, consumed by his demons, had abandoned her and their child, leaving her to face the world alone. The weight of her loneliness and despair had driven the woman to the brink of madness. In her anguish, she had taken the life of her child before ending her own. The tragic events had stained the very walls of the house, trapping her spirit within its confines. Tears streamed down Jessica's face as she listened to the woman's sorrowful tale. She could feel the immense pain and suffering that had consumed the spirit, a reflection of her own suppressed emotions. At that moment, Jessica realized that the woman's cries were not just echoes from the past, but a reflection of her inner turmoil. Moved by compassion, Jessica extended her hand toward the ghostly figure. "I hear your cries, and I understand your pain. But it's time to find peace, for both of us. Let go of your anguish and embrace the light." The spirit hesitated, her ethereal form flickering. Then, with a glimmer of hope in her eyes, she reached out and grasped Jessica's hand. As their hands touched, a surge of energy passed between them, enveloping the room in a blinding light. In that blinding brilliance, the spirit dissipated, leaving only a profound sense of tranquility in its wake. Jessica felt a weight lift from her shoulders as the room regained its stillness. The air was no longer thick with sadness, but filled with a newfound serenity. With a sense of closure and peace, Jessica returned home, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She lay on the bed and slept. She woke up and she was feeling lighter than before. She left the room and looked at the next house. She smiled, thinking that the nightmares had ended. As she left for her household work, a shadow smiled from the window of the next house.